What's up, everybody? Apoptosis808 back once again with another WoW Classic Rogue video. This time, though, we are going to be taking a look at a different specialization for Rogue, which is going to be the Cold Blood Preparation Spec. So this is a PvP-focused specialization. I figured with Phase 2 coming out in just a few days, maybe some people could use a little bit of help in understanding what sort of PvP specs might be out there for rogues to use. Cold Blood Preparation, not overly difficult. There's a few quirks to it, but I think with this guide, it might clear a few things up and help you out along the way. So first of all, I do want to say, just kind of as a disclaimer before we get into PvP, it is a lot less solved, let's say, than PvE is. PvE, you can get down to the meticulous detail, you can eke out every ounce of DPS, but that's against NPC mobs, where we already know what they're going to do. Against other players or groups of other players, it becomes a much more up-in-the-air scenario. So that does mean that you have to think on the fly. You aren't able to just follow a standard rotation. You more so can look at your abilities as like a toolbox. You're trying to ultimately get to one goal, but you have a lot of tools in your kit in order to accomplish that. And rogues have a really fantastic toolbox in general. So first of all, let's take a look at what is the general idea for this specialization. If everything goes our way, what are we trying to do? So as I mentioned before, this is a cold blood eviscerate or preparation spec, and that is the name of the abilities that this specialization focuses on. So first of all, we can take a look. Cold Blood here, which is in the Assassination tree, when activated, increases the critical strike chance of your next sinister strike, backstab, ambush, or eviscerate by 100%. The second part of the name here is Preparation. When activated, this ability immediately finishes the cooldown on your other rogue abilities. So using these two in conjunction, you're basically trying to get 5 combo points on your target, activate Cold Blood, cast Eviscerate so that it's 100% chance to crit, so that it's going to critically strike for you, and then if necessary, Preparation, and do it again against your target. Pretty simple, but like I said, PvP, it's a lot less learned. There's more gray area that we have to worry about. So let's go over the talents here. There's a bit more wiggle room for talents in PvP rather than there is in PvE. I'll go over some of the choices I made, some of the mistakes I have in my specialization here, and where you could put your points if you want to. So generally as a PvP spec, it's going to start in subtlety here. So let's take a look at that first. And that's actually where we're going to see the biggest mistake I made when doing the specialization, and something I hope you can learn from me from not to do. This first row here, we have Master of Deceit and Opportunity. Mistakenly, I took 5 points of Opportunity. What this does is increases the damage dealt when striking behind your target with backstab, garrote, or ambush. The reason why this is a mistake is because Cold Blood Eviscerate is a sword specialization. You want to use a sword as opposed to a dagger. All of these abilities are going to require a dagger, except for garrote, which we do not want to use, and I'll get into why that is later on. So instead of taking these 5 points of Opportunity, just go ahead and take 5 points of Master of Deception. Makes you harder to see when you're invisible. Fantastic. The second row here, we're going to want to grab 2 points of Elusiveness. Reduces the cooldown of your Vanish and Blind abilities by 1.5 minutes. Generally just great. Those are your 2 big survival abilities, Blind being one of your best card controls that the rogue has to offer. Vanish, a very good escape for your general situations when you're not winning the fight rather. 5 points in Camouflage, increases your speed while stealth by 15%, and reduces the cooldown of your stealth ability by 5 seconds. The cooldown is nice, but really the star for this is that increased speed. The next row here, not too much we need to do. 3 points in Initiative gives you a 75% chance to add an additional combo point to your target when using your Ambush, Garrote, or Cheap Shot ability. Ambush and Garrote, we can pretty much ignore that. We're only really going to focus on Cheap Shot. This makes it possible for your Cheap Shot opener to give you 3 combo points instead of 2 at 75% of the time. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the entire point of this specialization is to just hit 5 combo points as fast as possible, as quickly as you can. There is an ability I left out here, and this could be a wiggle room ability if you want. Ghostly Strike is not bad by any means. It's 20-second cooldown, costs 40 energy, a strike that deals 125% weapon damage. Not too great, but it increases your chance to dodge by 15% for 7 seconds. This is pretty good if you're fighting against other rogues, paladins, warriors, which you do want to be a little careful about dodging warriors, or any other melee class or pet class. It's just going to be a little helpful. It's not too big to get though, so if you want to skip it, that's fine. I elected to skip it. The next row here, 3 points in improved sap. Being able to have a 90% chance to return to stealth after using sap is really great. Helps you even the odds if you're going up against more than one player, or helps you stay stealth and set up on one single target for you. Serrated Blades causes your attacks to ignore 300 of your target's armor and increases the damage dealt by your Rupture ability by 30%. The amount of armor reducing increases with your level. So again, just having that armor reduction is very important here. It's a nice thing. It's not super required. We might skip this if it wasn't required to get Hemorrhage, which we'll take a look at here in a second. That's really what we want to get to. The armor reduction it's just nice. So there's nothing wrong with that. Again, the Rupture ability increase. We're not going to be using Rupture too much. There are specific scenarios where it could be very useful to do, but for the most part, we do not want to add any bleeds to our target. And I'll go over all that in a second. So this next row here, let's look. Serrated Blades, that opens up Hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is our main combo point generator when we're using this specialization. Let's take a look at what it does here. 35 energy, so extremely low energy cost. An instant strike that damages the opponent and causes them to hemorrhage, increases the physical damage dealt to the target by up to 3, lasts for 30 charges or 15 seconds, awards 1 combo point. It's nice, and you get a bit of extra physical damage to your target, but the big star here is that it's such a low energy cost at 35. You're going to be able to spam this ability a lot more than, say, Sinister Strike. So that's why we want to grab this one here. The other ones we grab here are Preparation. Huge ability, absolutely massive for rogues trying to do any sort of PvP. When activated, this ability immediately finishes the cooldown on your other rogue abilities. That's Evasion, that's Vanish, that's Blind, that's, you know, our Cold-Blooded Self. So we want to grab that so that we can essentially just do everything again. If you're still having a prolonged fight, or if you're caught out in the open and your abilities aren't off of cooldown yet and you really need access to them right away, you can boom, just pop Preparation and you're good to go. You can also use this and essentially cold blood eviscerate your target twice, and that's a crazy amount of damage. And essentially that's going to be how you're going to be killing a lot of your opponents if you don't get them with that first one. So that's everything we want to take in Subtlety here. Let's take a look at Assassination and what we're grabbing here. 5 points in Malice, increases the critical strike chance by 5%. That's just a solid ability to grab, and we have a couple extra points here we want to take anyways. This is a critical ability, not really one that has any wiggle room. Increases the damage done by your Eviscerate ability by 15%. Your primary damage dealer is going to be Cold Blood Eviscerate, so you want to make sure you get as much damage out from Eviscerate as possible. Having the 15% additional damage is great. 2 out of 2 in Murder. It just increases damage by 2%. This is technically a little bit of wiggle room if you wanted to. We do have to dump a few points into Assassination extra, but you can play around with this. This isn't as critical if you didn't want to take it. 3 out of 3 in Ruthlessness. This is just a very solid ability. 60% chance to add a combo point to your target whenever you use a finishing move. So that means Eviscerate, that means Rupture, you know, those abilities which we're going to be spamming and trying to kill our opponents with. Relentless Strikes, your finishing moves have a 20% chance to restore 25 energy per combo point. So because we're going to be hitting those 5 combo points very often, and we're going to be using Eviscerate very often, that 25 extra energy is going to be happening quite often. 5 out of 5 of Lethality. This is, again, pretty good ability. Increases your critical strike damage bonus of your Sinister Strike, Gouache, Backstab, Ghostly Strike, and Hemorrhage abilities by 30%. We're going to be spamming Hemorrhage a ton, so anytime it critically strikes, having it do 30% more damage, it's just great. This is certainly a wiggle room area here. Improved poisons, I took 1 point in. You could opt to go for exposed armor if you chose to at this point. The improved poisons, it's again, this is just sort of a personal preference. Having a higher chance to apply poisons, you're going to be mainly using instant poison with this specialization, so having it just have a higher chance to apply, it's just going to be good. It's essentially, you could think of it like 2% more hit, I guess, on poisons. It doesn't quite equate that way, but having exposed armor can be quite good. It is a bit situational. You can do this versus basically every class. You're not always going to need to, especially early on in the phases, phase 1, phase 2, people aren't going to have extremely high armor. You're mainly going to be doing this against, I'd say, warriors, paladins, things like that, but you can use it against mages and warlocks if you want to, and essentially reduce their armor down to 0. Alright, now let's take a look. Cold Blood here. This is our primary ability. This is what we're gunning for. This is how we're going to kill people. When activated, increases the critical strike chance of your next sinister strike, backstab, ambush, or eviscerate by 100%. When this activates, there is no duration. It stays on you until you use one of those abilities on an enemy, and the cooldown does not begin until you've used up that buff, essentially. So you're not really under too much of a time pressure to use this, though when you're going to be attacking, it is pretty important to get that out. Keep in mind, this does not increase the critical strike chance of your Hemorrhage. So what that means is you could have this going and just be hemorrhaging your target, having it ready to go, and then eviscerating once you get 5 combo points. So a little bit neat there. I choose to get the 3 points in improved kidney shot. It's just a nice ability to use, and you're going to be doing it quite often in your PvP. So when you are kidney shot and stunning your target for up to 5 seconds, you're going to be getting an increased 9% damage from all sources. So again, just flat out more damage. But this is a little bit of wiggle room. You don't have to get all 3 points. You could put some points in other areas if you have some sort of preference. The remaining points, I just throw them into Gouache. It's really nice to have an extended duration Gouache. I only had 2 points left over, so instead of getting the full 1.5 seconds, I just get the 1 second left over, but it's better than nothing. So now that we've gone over the talents, let's take a look at the gear and stat priority. So there is actually a little bit of stat priority that we do want to focus on. And gear, it's a little bit, it's actually quite a bit more different than what you want to aim for PvE. So as you probably can tell just from my character model, my character is mainly from PvE. But that doesn't mean that you're going to have a bad time in PvP. It just means that, you know, you have some other gear you can try to focus on if you're really trying to make a big effort in focusing on PvP. So the most important thing that you want to get is plus 5% hit. So you can see I'm actually at 4% hit, and this is kind of crucial because when we are doing this specialization, we don't get that benefit from precision. So that means you have to get 5% hit additional purely from your gear. So I'm actually 1% hit away because I just do the traditional 5% from that and another percentage from my gear. So basically getting that 5% hit is the most important thing that you want to do. That's the soft cap. I've referenced this before in my other guide videos. That's the soft cap. That means that your yellow hits, your abilities will never miss against your target. Okay, they can still be dodged, but they will never miss, assuming that you're attacking them from behind as well. That means you're also getting rid of that parry. So the only thing that can happen is they could get dodged. For white hits, you still have a huge amount of miss chance. It's something I think around 24% or so. So it's really not even very viable to focus on getting hit after that 5%. Is it going to hurt you? Not necessarily, but you want to focus on other stats a lot more than you do hit. The longer the fight's going on, the worse it's kind of going for the rogue. With this specialization, you are really trying to get in, get out, do your damage, and just end your opponent as fast as possible. After you get that 5% hit, what is the next most important stat to focus on? Believe it or not, spamming a ton of stamina is actually going to help your class out quite a bit. So long that it's not at the deficit of too much of your attack power, getting a huge amount of stamina is going to help you out quite a bit in PvP. The longer you can survive, if you can survive another rogue's stun chain, if you can survive a warrior's critical strikes, then that means you're going to be able to vanish, reopen on your opponent, and put the initiative back in your favor. So actually getting a high amount of stamina is going to be very important if you're trying to focus on PvP. After that, you actually want to then be focusing on as much attack power as possible. Critical strike is not very important for this specialization. It's not going to hurt you to have critical strike, but having higher attack power in general is going to help you out a lot more. The reason for that is because we already are going to get a 100% chance to critical strike on our eviscerate. So we're going to critically strike when it counts, which is when we're going to eviscerate. That means while we're building those combo points, while we're doing those white hits, we want to be doing as much damage as physically possible. So having increased attack power is going to make our hemorrhage hit a lot harder. It's going to make our regular auto attacks hit a lot harder. So you just want to be spamming as much attack power as possible. And that's really it. I mean, after that, agility, critical strike, again, those are great to get, don't get me wrong, but having as high attack power, as high stamina as possible is going to be a lot more important after you hit that 5% hit soft cap. So let's take a little bit of a look at the gear that you want to focus on for this specialization. I'll tell you a few things that you would like to get. It would be kind of nice, as well as some gear you would like to avoid. So in general, like I was mentioning before, this is a sword specialization. So getting something like Dalrins is really good. Getting the Vishkog sword from Onyxia is fantastic. I have neither of those. I'm typically a PvE player. I actually play a dagger specialization, so I just threw on our old Thrash Blade for this one here. It's not going to hurt you, but the better sword that you can get with the highest top-end damage is going to be your go-to. It's your priority. We don't need daggers, so for your secondary, getting the best offhand as far as weapon speed goes, you want to get a very fast offhand without too much of a concern on how much damage it's going to do. Just the speed is going to matter a lot for getting those poisons on there within reason. I mean, we don't want to throw on, you know, a kind of crappy level 40 dagger or something like that because it's faster. I got extremely lucky. I have Fell Striker. It's like one of the best PvP daggers you can get right now. If you're not as lucky as me, that's okay. Just go with something really fast. That's going to be your prime concern, essentially. But you don't have to do a sword in the second hand. Whatever you got that's faster and within reason is going to be what you want to go for. What you want to avoid is any weapon that has some kind of bleed effect on it. So essentially, I've talked about it in my other videos as well. The Barman Shanker would be a terrible weapon to use for this specialization, and for PvP in general, I would say, because it causes a bleed on your target. When you are PvPing as a rogue, it's all about control. Knowing when your target is going to get out of a stun, when they're going to get out of blind is extremely important. When you put bleeds on them, when you put a poison that does a damage over time on them, that takes that out of your control. It essentially wipes all of that off the table. It says, you can't use blind anymore. You can't use gouge anymore. And that's terrible. We're not going to be able to do as much damage if we can't use those abilities. So Barman Shanker is right out, and anything else that causes any sort of bleed over time from a weapon is out. We don't want to focus on that. So now let's take a look at what sort of consumables would be pretty good for this specialization. And just in general PvP, this doesn't necessarily focus on just only cold blood preparation. This is just PvP in general at this point for rogues, but I feel like it's important to go over it. Free action potions are extremely good. Having the ability to be immune to stun and movement impairing effects for 30 seconds is obviously going to be fantastic for you. That means that no stun from paladins, no stuns from warriors, not being able to be slowed by mages, all of those things are just going to be making your life so much easier. So if you're able to stack these up before you go into combat, go ahead and drink one of those. Keep in mind, you have to do it before you go into, or before you get hit by the stun, or the slow, rather, okay? So you want to preemptively drink a free action potion. You don't want to use it, or try to use it when you're stunned, because it's not going to work. In addition to that, specific to rogues, Thistle Tea We know this from our PvE, and instantly restores 100 energy. It's a fantastic consumable. It's always going to be useful. Using that when you hit 0 energy or right at it, it's just going to give you this huge surge of damage, and it's going to really help you get to those 5 combo points. Obviously, I shouldn't really need to say this, but health potions are going to be great. Being able to stay in the combat longer, restoring, 2,000 plus health with major healing potions is going to be a fantastic thing for you as a rogue. You essentially are restoring 2/3 of your health when you drink one of these and you high roll it a little bit. And then the last thing really I want to talk about as far as consumables go is if you're specifically an engineer, having grenades, having the goblin sapper, thorium grenades, and the iron grenades are fantastic against ranged targets like mages and hunters, because it gives you a little bit of time. It gives you a distance stun in order to catch up to your target. If a mage blinks out of your hit range and they start casting polymorph on you or something like that, throwing down a thorium grenade, throwing down an iron grenade, and interrupting that with a ranged stun is just going to be so crucial for you as a rogue, and again, swings that initiative back into your favor. So at this point, let's go ahead and look at what sort of poisons we want to be using on our weapons. Okay, so this one, you would think, gosh, there's so many different ones. What am I going to want to use between instant, crippling, wounding, mind-numbing, deadly poison even? I can tell you for the most part, instant poison is going to be your go-to. Wounding poison, crippling poison, mind-numbing poison, those have their place, don't get me wrong. If you're going up against a healer, if you're going up against a paladin, wounding poison can be fantastic as it reduces that ability for them to heal. Crippling poison is generally pretty good against any melee class or range class if they're happening to escape from you for a little bit. Mind-numbing poison obviously can be quite good against casters, slows their roll a little bit, but essentially when I'm going to be going PvPing, I'm more than likely going to be slapping instant poison on both of my weapons. Just getting the ability to deal more damage in a faster time is going to be more important than slowing down their cast rate or slowing their movement speed. Those can be great. Again, don't get me wrong. There are situations for them, but I would call them situational at best. Instant poison is a very safe bet. If you're not sure what to do, double instant poison, you're good to go. One thing that you should never do is use deadly poison if you're going for more of this control aspect. Unless you're going for some kind of dot build where you're using garrote, where you're using rupture, then go ahead, go for the deadly poison. But if you're not, and you're going for this more control-oriented style, do not use deadly poison. Again, it takes that ability for you to crowd control them out of your hands. We don't want to do that. So now we can go ahead, let's take a look at some of the abilities that Rogue have that are quite key for PvP. A lot of them are pretty self-explanatory, but there is a little bit of situational awareness to be used with some of them, depending on what class you're going up against. And that's actually something I want to take a pretty big note of. Knowing the class that you're fighting against, knowing their abilities, knowing their cooldowns, what are their escapes, what are their resets, is very critical for just PvP in general. Knowing that mages can blink, they can frost nova, they can ice block, they can slow you with frostbolt, all of those things can be very beneficial for you. Understanding what abilities to use and when that is going to take a lot of practice. It's going to take a lot of learning. It's going to take a lot of trial and error. There's going to be a lot of times when you go up against a mage and you blind at the wrong time, or you use your sprint or something like that, and you're not gonna get this overnight. It's gonna take some time. Myself, again, not a fantastic PvPer, but I'm learning, and I'm hoping you are too with this one. So let's take a look at these abilities. Enough blabbing for now. Some of the key abilities that we have, Kidney Shot being one of them. Generally, when we have 5 combo points, we really want to be spending that on Cold Blood Eviscerate. That being said, Kidney Shot, obviously, it's a fantastic ability. If you're going up against a high armor, high health target like a protection warrior or a paladin or someone who's able to out heal you or what have you, having Kidney Shot, having that extra lockdown on your target, giving you that extra time you need is going to be crucial for you to defeat them. as well as Cheap Shot. That is our main stealth opener as a rogue. We usually want to open with Cheap Shot, get that possibility of 3 combo points, in addition stunning them for 4 seconds. Again, no brainer on this one. As a sword main hand user, your only other option really is Garrote, and that's off the table, like we mentioned before. Cold Blood. Only use this when you're about to eviscerate. Don't use it to Sinister Strike. Don't use it to ambush or backstab, unless you're trying to do some hybrid dagger spec where you're opening with a Cold Blood ambush. I've seen a couple of those. In general, save this for when you're about to 5 combo point eviscerate. You're good to go on that one. Eviscerate. Obviously, this is how we're going to be killing our opponent here. It does a static amount of damage, so we're not looking at too much play. 899 at the top end for 5 combo points. You're looking at about a 1600 crit or so. So that's going to be, that's going to be how we're killing our targets in general, are these 2 abilities here, Cold Blood and Eviscerate. That's our bread and butter. Expose Armor, I mentioned before, this can be kind of situational. We want to use this on those high armor targets, Paladins, Warriors. If you want to experiment this with going against casters, you can essentially reduce their armor almost to 0, and then none of your physical damage is really getting reduced by anything. So that can be quite good as well. In combat, we have Evasion. Evasion is a little bit of a tricky ability sometimes. Again, this is where knowing your opponent comes into play a lot more. Against Warriors, for instance, is the specific time we want to gauge if we should use this or not. In general, you should be okay to pop Evasion. The reason why we want to be hesitant about it is because Evasion is essentially going to guarantee that their Overpower ability will have a proc. Overpower activates for Warriors when one of their abilities is dodged. Overpower can do a ton of damage as well to rogues, and it only has a 5-second cooldown, where Evasion lasts for 15 seconds. So you can essentially basically guarantee that that warrior is going to be able to overpower strike you 3 times. And there is also an ability that warriors get that increases the critical strike chance of their overpower by, I believe it's around 50% or so. Essentially, you're looking at higher than a coin flip chance that they're going to be able to critically strike you 3 times in 15 seconds when you use Evasion. So just be careful. Against everyone else, you're pretty much good to go. This is really only going to help you too much against those physical damage classes, hunters, other rogues, paladins, things of that nature. Feint is totally useless. Backstab's totally useless for us. Gouache. So this is a really great ability. This is a fantastic reset for rogues. With that improvement, it does a 5-second incapacitation to your target. With the upgraded, it does a 5.5. So it will turn off your auto attack. It lets you regen your energy as well. Lets you reset the fight if you need to. Again, swings that initiative back in your favor. Another fantastic thing to do while you're gouging or blinding is to bandage up. That's a fantastic opportunity to use a bandage. You can almost get a full bandage worth of healing done, which is almost a full reset of the fight. Kick is amazing. Knowing when to kick is just as important as the ability itself. It does have a 10-second cooldown, so it's not the end of the world if you kick the wrong spell or ability. Very knowledgeable PvP players will try to bait out certain cooldowns from rogues, like kick, by casting other spells that aren't so important. If you do get improved kick, which we don't have in this scenario, but there are some hybrid specs that do take improved kick by going into combat, that gives you a 100% chance to silence them for 2 seconds. So that can be pretty beneficial versus your mages and your warlocks and things of that nature, and your priests as well. Sinister Strike is not used in this specialization. In Sprint is fantastic, helps you close that distance when mages blink, helps you close in on hunters that have opened on you. Keep in mind though, and this is pretty critical, you do not have the improved Sprint, so that means that you are not getting rid of movement impairing abilities and effects, so you are only running faster. You're not able to use it to break out of binds, so just keep that in mind when you use it with this specialization. Okay, Subtlety. Tons of great abilities here. Blind, another really big reset for rogues, allows you to close the distance against mages that have blinked away, hunters that have opened on you, priests, any target that's too far away from you. Blind is a fantastic ability. It does have only a 10-yard range, so it's not like it's a massive distance by any means, but it's better than nothing. And even using it just as a reset for yourself is great. So long, again, as there's no bleeds on your targets, you can use it to get a full bandage down. You can use it to generate more energy. You can use it to reset combat and re-stealth. It just essentially, again, gives you some more time to figure out what it is that you need to do next. Distract can kind of be a meme for some people. Putting them in the right position, trying to distract them off of cliffs, that's always fun, but not really necessary. Disarm trap, I mean, it lets you essentially see the traps that hunters put down. You can technically disarm them. You're probably just better served going around them. Hemorrhage is fantastic. Go ahead and make sure that you grab the higher ranks of this. My rank is only 1 at the time. I need to make sure that I go and upgrade this a little bit more. That is important to note. When you get Hemorrhage, there are abilities of it to train at your class trainer. If you've never taken it before, make sure you go back to your class trainer and you get those upgraded versions of it, because it's going to be way better for you. Preparation, we mentioned this before, just a fantastic reset of all of your abilities. I like to use it after I've essentially drained every cooldown that I have. We get the preparation and do it all again. Sap is a fantastic opener. With improved Sap, you can stay stealth 90% of the time. It gives you, again, that sort of equalizer. If there are 2 players that you're fighting at the same time, you can sap one of them, try to kill the other person, and go back to the sap target. You can use it to buy more time for you to engage your target, what have you. Stealth, if I have to tell you what that does, you're in the wrong place, man. Vanish, a fantastic resets. It gives you improved stealth, which is actually pretty important. So it makes it extremely hard to find you after you've vanished. It does break movement impairing effects, so Frost Nova, those slows that are binding you down. It's a really great ability to use against mages, against hunters, if you're stuck in those traps as well. You can use Vanish, you can break out of it so long as you can cast it. Just make sure you have Flash Powder, because I have been caught out in the wilderness and not have Flash Powder and go to Vanish and just kind of slackjaw at my screen and then die. Vanish lets you reopen on your target as well, which is crucial, so you can get another 2, possibly 3 ability point cheat shot, and it lets you essentially start all over again. Rogues are their strongest when they're opening on their target. You're at max energy. You're one of your strongest opener with cheap shots, so Vanish just lets you do that again. Don't be afraid to Vanish in a fight. Do not be afraid to try to just eke out a little bit more stun on your opponent by vanishing and opening with a cheap shot. If you're losing the fight, don't be afraid to Vanish. Reset it. Sap them instead. Give yourself some time. Rogues have a lot of options. Don't be afraid to experiment around with them. So that's pretty much it, you guys, to be honest with you. We went over all of the crucial points for Subtlety Rogues. If you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm over at twitch.tv/apoptosis808. You can also join my Discord down below, that's in the description. I would really appreciate it. But if you have any questions, if you're not sure, if you wanna give some suggestions to something else that you think maybe I missed, feel free to do so down in the comments. But until next time, guys, I appreciate it. Happy hunting out there. Best of luck once phase 2 hits and that open world PvP is just gonna get insane, and you know it is. But hopefully with this guide, you feel a little bit more confident in going out there and trying to gank some people. Take care.